And good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever you are, and welcome to the Groovy Podcast. My name is Ken Kousen, podcasting from Marlborough, Connecticut, and I'm joined by...
Baruch Sadogursky. That's for you, Ken. From Sunnyvale, California. Hi, everybody, and happy holidays.
Absolutely. Happy holidays to you as well. You look like you're in the office right now. Is that true?
Yes, I am.
How are things out in Sunnydale?
Sunnyvale. Yeah, it's
Sunnyvale.
quite sunny today. It's fine. Yeah, not that cold. Had a couple of cold days earlier, but now it's just fine.
Yeah, of course, what you call cold and what much of the rest of the country calls cold are two different things.
Well, yeah, we got to the freezing point a couple of nights ago.
Okay, very good. Anyway.
I'm glad you liked it.
Well, fine. I just remember seeing some tweets from some friends in Minnesota, minus 17 below, minus 24 below Fahrenheit, which is pretty cold, actually.
Yeah, that's the reason why we are not in Minnesota but in California. So for us, even the freezing point, it's like way too cold. We didn't sign up for that.
I often feel that way, especially about Minneapolis. We go there twice a year for the No Fluff shows, and every time I go there, I like the people and I like the environment. Everything's great, and I think, boy, it might be nice to be here a while. And then I walk outside and go, no, that's okay. Thanks anyway. So we have a nice list of things that went on. We haven't done a newsy podcast in a while. Our last podcast was live from the G3 Summit. So I've got a list here on the show notes, which, just as a reminder for those of you listening, it's at github.com/pledbrook, Peter Ledbrook, /Groovy Podcast. And there's a special file for each one of the podcasts there. Although if you notice there's a number missing, it's usually because we did a live podcast and didn't prepare show notes for that. That's why we're on 39 rather than 38. So just a quick reminder right off the top that the Groovy Slack channel is still pretty active. Do you go there much?
Yes, I'm there like almost every day. And mostly reading, but sometimes, I have stuff to say as well. A couple of interesting channels are there. So there is a channel for Groovy puzzlers that we don't expect people to actually post the puzzlers, but just come in touch and say, okay, we have this groovy, cool stuff that we want to share. Another one is Groovy Twitter, which I think is a bot that posts there the tweets about Groovy, and that's a very easy way to know what to retweet and gain some good followers on Twitter as well. There is a Russian language channel, which is very, very important. Not very active lately, but there are some interesting announcements there. Sergei Egorov, who got the status of Apache committer, is there. So if that's your thing, you're more than invited.
I haven't visited the Slack channel a lot. I have other things that I try to keep up on. I keep up on Twitter. I keep up on blogs and try to watch some podcasts and various other things. So it's hard to keep up on everything. That's one I haven't done a lot of. Maybe I need to ramp that up. At any rate, there's a link to the Groovy Community Slack in the show notes, as well as a link to the archive, so that everything supposedly in the Groovy channel is archived at groovy-community.slackarchive.io. Okay, so we haven't had a lot of releases, a lot of end-of-year releases. We have a lot of activity, however. Grails did release a bug fix version. They're up to 3.2.4 now. I don't remember there being anything major-wise regarding new features. I think it was mostly just bug fixes and updates to the basic functionality.
Yeah, but that's the last release of the year from them, I guess.
Well, I would think so, given that we're on the... I guess we should even mention it. I didn't even say today's the December 22nd, Thursday. So, I don't expect a lot of activity between now and the end of the year. Well, except for you. I know you're very busy between now and the end of the year, right?
Just working,
Yeah, exactly. Got all those frogs to produce and everything. I get it.
Yeah.
Okay, so some other things that came up, just random newsy things. I noticed the Gradle Twitter feed at Gradle. Is good for daily Gradle information, and they happen to post something that I not recognize right away. It turns out that in Gradle 3.2, if you are doing a large build and you do Control-C or whatever to get out of it, turns out that does not, in fact, kill the Gradle daemon, which apparently previously it used to. Did you know that?
That's a new one. Those are the improvements of daemon that they do. I didn't notice that particularly. What I know for sure that it's used to kill the daemon and it wasn't nice. So I'm glad to hear that it's not the case anymore.
Yep, one of the big changes in Gradle 3.0, of course, was that they made the daemon be on by default, which in Gradle 2. Versions was not true. You used to have to set org.gradle.daemon equals true in your Gradle.properties file, either globally, quote, globally in your own system or in an individual project. Now you don't have to do that. They recommend on a CI server you turn it off, of course, so that everything's nicely reproducible, nothing's cached. But interesting to know that you can kill a build and not wind up killing the daemon as well. Speaking of Gradle, Cedric Champeau gave his talk at the so-called Virtual Jug, the Virtual Java Users Group, and he did a talk on what he called extremely fast builds with Gradle 3, and he linked to his slides online. So we have a link in the show notes for those slides. I just skimmed through them. The normal recommendations, I don't think you'll find anything too dramatically surprising, but a lot of recommendations on how to profile and look at information that will give you how to determine information that will tell you what to do to profile your build and improve the productivity.
Yeah, and it's also the things that we consider like when known and trivial are come as a surprise for a lot of more novice users. So it was a good good talk, good stuff.
I'm sure it's always good. Just most of the people I assume listening to this podcast, I mean, all of them, right? I mean, it could be, I've been thinking about that. I think we've been underestimating how many listeners we have. We could very well get into double digits now and then.
Seriously, like 10?
Well, at least. I mean, maybe 15 even. I don't know. I mean, it could be because, I run into these people periodically when I go to conferences. They, I'm one of those 3 listeners. I'm like, wow, it could very well be a dozen for all we know.
So my hypothesis would be that you run to the same 3 people, and just because of your age, you keep forgetting who they were.
That is a legitimate possibility, yeah.
Right. And they're like, 3 more, but they're actually the same 3.
Actually, the best comment I heard is somebody accused us of trying to bump up our listener numbers by having like 4 or 5 guests on the Groovy Podcast at the G3 Summit. Thus guaranteeing we'd have all those extra listeners. And that's how
we went to 200% exposure of that particular episode.
I took that as a compliment, frankly. Okay, now next, interesting little project going on. Someone has created, I have a link out to check it, a new project called Ersatz, E-R-S-A-T-Z, is a mock HTTP server library from the same people who are working on that HTTP Builder-NG project. We didn't actually talk about that HTTP Builder-NG yet. Have you taken a look at that at all? I know you want
Yes, and I'm very excited about it because unfortunately all the HTTP Builder that we all used, and it was a DSL wrapper, Groovy DSL wrapper on top of HTTP client, was, how to put it nicely, a piece of crap. So I'm very excited to see the HTTP Builder NG. It's about time Groovy had a good HTTP oriented HTTP client with a proper DSL. I think it's great.
I knew you weren't wild about the old one. I never quite understood why, but okay, that's fine. I read through the HTTP Builder NG blog post. We put a link in the show notes, so if anybody wants to take a look at that. So it looks great. I assume NG stands for next generation. I don't remember it being written out anywhere inside there, unless you know differently.
Yeah, no.
Yep.
NG is definitely next generation.
I would think so. At any rate, the HTTP Builder NG blog post that announced it came out back in September. So I'm a little surprised we haven't talked about it, but I don't know, just got lost in the way. At any rate, the same people have now put out this Ersatz mock HTTP server library so that they can make a mock server just to easily make it to act like you have a real server, but just provides outputs for both gets and posts, puts, deletes, all those different things on demand.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense because most of the DSL and the model is exactly the same.
Right. So very useful there. Looks like a very promising project there. Now, our last podcast was from the G3 Summit, and it turns out that several of those presentations are making their way online. Soren Glazius especially, I don't know how he made all those recordings himself. Do you?
No, I don't know. I didn't see him with a camera or something, but apparently he was.
Yeah, he's got these pretty high-quality screencasts going, and I put a link to 2 of them, actually 3 of them in the show notes. One that I definitely want to watch is the one on the Fields plugin. That's significant, of course, because that's the mechanism used by the Grails scaffolding. And the nice thing about that is that with the static scaffolding, you're generating views that will not update based on new quantities or new attributes inside your entities, your domain classes. But once they introduced the Fields plugin, then it didn't matter because you could still generate scaffolding that was the overall structure, and the Fields plugin would take care of all the individual properties and the drop downs and all those features. I understand normally you don't want to leave any scaffolding in your Grails app when you go into production, but as a way to get started, I've always felt that was really helpful. I do know we had that conversation a while ago on how the dynamic scaffolding was so badly misused by so many people, people actually leaving it in production, that the Grails team felt that they wanted to remove it, and it was only due to the outcry that they put it back reluctantly. At least with the Fields plugin and the static scaffolding, you have something that at least is compiled and effective and responsive to changes in your domain model. Any rate, so there's a deep dive on that. Soren did one, and it's a YouTube recording that I have plans to watch over the break here. He also did a couple, one called Tour de Plugin, which I assume is also about Grails plugins, giving some ideas of some plugins there, and then also one called Get to Know Grails. These clearly are all partly related to the fact that Soren is now an employee of OCI.
And I think that's a big win-win for both for OCI and for Soren, because he knows how to make things visible to the community, and that's a great win.
Oh yeah, it does that. And of course, for those people who don't know, Soren is also the person behind the Great Conf series, even though there are different people who run the US version and the Indian version. Soren is the creator of the brand, runs the European one, and of course provides support and assistance, recommendations for the other affiliated conferences as well. So very great contributor to the community, very helpful in that sense. The other G3 Summit talks I noticed, I didn't put up recordings of those. I didn't see recordings. I saw slides and code and things. Ivan Lopez, good old Ilopmar. I never asked him what the Twitter handle means, Ilopmar, but at any rate, Ivan.
Ivan Lopez.
Yeah.
And then Mar. I don't know what it stands for.
Yeah, exactly. Mar is water, but I don't know. I'm sure he will let us know. He is also, of course, the person behind. What does he produce? He doesn't. No, actually, I was thinking of Sergio Delamo does Groovy Calamari. Ivan does something else, though. I'm blanking on it right now. I'm sure he'll let us know. At any rate, we have talks from his on taking advantage of Groovy annotations. Also one called Dockerize Your Grails, which I'm sure some people will be very interested in. And then one on creating applications with Grails, AngularJS, and Spring Security, which I think was a tutorial he gave. Oh, I'm sorry, that wasn't Ivan. That was Alvaro Sanchez Mariscal. Is that how you say it?
Yeah, I think so.
Alvaro? Yeah, he gave that tutorial, I think, at GreatConf in Copenhagen, and I believe he gave a similar presentation at G3. He must have, because this is the slides for that as well. Have you tried to put Grails in a Docker container or anything like that? Are you one of these container people or not?
Yeah, I am one of the container people, although I didn't put a well, what I can guarantee is that we have a Docker container that runs Bintray interaction server, Bintray UI, which is a great application as a container.
I really have done very little with those things, which I know is my own fault. I tried it once and I ran into some stumbling blocks, and I don't work with people who use them, so I never really pushed through. But I know that's very, very popular. Admitting you're not using a container is kind of like admitting that you don't do anything reactive these days, which is just bad form, right? I mean, that's
Right.
everything is Rx, this, that, and the other. But
Right.
that's a whole different talk. Also, Paul King put his slides up for Apache Groovy, the awesome parts. I think that's a very similar talk to the one he gave at Copenhagen and at other places. But any excuse to recommend something by Paul King is a good one. So.
Yeah, and I think that's just the beginning of a great series of talks, because there is so much to talk about, and probably Paul King is the right person to run this series of talk, and they can go deeper, they can go wider. It's just just whatever you want to throw there. It's good stuff, and if Paul King is going to continue to do sequels to this talk, it will be just great.
Well, and Paul, of course, that also gives us a chance to remind everybody that Paul has now joined OCI on it's not a full-time basis, but it is a regular basis.
And I think it's going to be full-time in a week, like starting January, if I remember correctly.
I talked to him at the G3 Summit. I wasn't sure what the time frame was, but of course he had existing obligations he had to wind down. But however the details are handled, he is now going to be funded to work on Groovy, especially in support of Grails, but just generally in support of the framework for everything, which is a wonderful thing to know. I saw that he and Guillaume Laforge had a nice little meeting after we wrapped up the podcast in Fort Lauderdale. So that was all good.
Yep. No, it's those are, of course, another great news for the community. Paul King being with OCI, working full-time job on Groovy, doing real significant progress towards Groovy 3. I know that he's occupied with building this release pipeline that matches Apache Foundation procedures and standards. And of course, we are here in JFrog helping him to set up all the Artifactory and Bintray pipeline to be able to release as fast as possible, theoretically by 2 clicks of a button, one going to the voting stage and the other, after the voting is done, actually releasing. And hopefully we'll see much more frequent Groovy releases in the future.
That's very helpful. I mean, the only downside, if there even is a downside of going to the Apache Software Foundation, was the much more formal process for delivering new releases. And I'm glad that now, hopefully they'll be able to get back to producing releases as frequently as they would like. Now yep. I think it's still too much pain, but it's getting there very much.
Yeah, so they did a couple of releases in a very manual way to make sure that they actually comprehend all the steps in the process by just manually doing it. And now when the process is clear, we can automate most of it, and then of course it will be easier on everybody.
Yeah, the whole DevOps idea. It's another 2016 buzzword, right? Or 20.
Yeah, no, but you know us. If you have to do it twice, you write a script for it.
Right. I mean, that's what do they call it? Continuous delivery there as well, right? So I'm just full of buzzwords these days, I guess. On an unrelated note, but interesting, Trisha G, who I don't know if you've met Trisha.
Yes, of course.
Yes, Trisha is.
And I think it's Guy, if I remember correctly.
No, I asked her. I actually did ask her. And she like Jeff.
Okay.
Open up that can of worms. No, it's actually with a J. It's like it was a J. So it's Trisha G. And of course, if I get that wrong, I'll correct it on the next podcast. But at any rate, she is a Java champion. And about a year ago, I guess, she went to work for JetBrains as a developer advocate.
That's correct.
Right. And she has, in the past, I don't know, month or so, produced a series of very short videos, roughly 2 to 3 minutes in length, illustrating features of IntelliJ IDEA 2016.3. The one I put in the show notes is about Gradle. They're not just basic Gradle support, and including composite builds. I haven't actually tried that in Gradle yet, or rather in IntelliJ. I did try one just from the command line, but apparently IntelliJ IDEA 2016.3 supports composite builds. I did watch your screencast, though, which showed how you could check certain settings in IntelliJ to make it so every time you do any build or run in IntelliJ, it actually delegates to Gradle.
Right.
Now, I want to mention, if you do go watch those screencasts, the one that I linked to is like number 6 or 7 out of a series of about 10 or 12, and they're all worth watching, although not that many of them directly impact Groovy or another Groovy-related technology.
It doesn't matter. Once you master your IDE, that's one of the most important skills every developer should have.
Yeah, if you're an IntelliJ person, they're certainly worth watching.
I don't know if there are many others left, especially in our community. If that's one of the topics that you spoke about, how the support in Eclipse is doing. So I guess more and more people go to the IDE with better Groovy support, and that's why.
We're going to have to talk about that at some point, because I ran into somebody and I mentioned that I didn't think anybody was working on the Eclipse plugin anymore, and they said they actually saw some commits on that they raised some issues and some things were being modified and changed. So
by whom?
I don't know who's doing it. I'm not aware of that activity. In fact, it didn't even occur to me to go look it up until now. But we might want to take a look, because maybe somebody is actively working on that plugin, which would be very helpful. I just have no idea who would be doing it at the moment.
Yeah, absolutely. That would be great news, because even though I am a very IntelliJ IDEA person, and I think that the gap between it and other IDEs keep growing and it's becoming even better, I still think competition is always a good thing to have.
Well, and also a lot of companies have pretty much locked their developers into one particular IDE or another, and since Eclipse was free for all those years, and it's still a very good IDE for Java development, even though I would agree IntelliJ is much better. Still, it's nice to know that it would be nice if somebody was helping the Groovy support in that area. Of course, if you bring up IDEs and you don't at least mention NetBeans, that's a small but very vocal community. They would not be happy to be overlooked, and they do.
True that. It's hard to overlook. Yep.
And
and I understand that they do good progress as well, and their support for Groovy is at least decent, if not better than that.
Well, we'll see how that goes, because, of course, that was part of Sun, and now it's part of Oracle. You never know with an Oracle-controlled legacy project. It could be eliminated at any moment. I just don't know what the situation is over there.
Aren't they moved out of Oracle to, I think, Apache as well?
I did hear a rumor regarding that. Why don't you check that one, and I'll cover a couple other things. So, at any rate, yeah, we'll look that up and get back to it.
Yes, they are Apache Incubator project, officially Apache NetBeans.
I did remember seeing something about that. We're going to have to add that to the show notes, and apologize to all the NetBeans users who are actually probably very happy that they're out from under Oracle at this point.
I guess, yes, and especially if we're talking about Groovy users that know that move to Apache actually doing good to your project, they should be very enthusiastic seeing NetBeans moving to Apache.
Okay, moving on. Mr. Hockey, Hubert A. Klein Inking, right? How do you say it right?
I call him Mr. Hockey.
Yes, mrhockey.blogspot.com, right? I could click on an About button here to make sure I get it right. Yeah, Hubert Klein Inking, right, with the A in there as well, known as Mr. Hockey. At any rate, he has been very active lately on his blog posts, but not that much directly related to the Groovy ecosystem. But one I did notice, he put up a Gradle goodness of how you can run a task ignoring up-to-date checks. Many people are familiar with the fact that in Gradle, then when Gradle is deciding whether to rerun a task or not, it does take snapshots of the inputs and the outputs and creates a hash for them and everything, and uses that to determine whether the task is up to date or whether it can be skipped. And what Mr. Hockey pointed out is something that I feel like I should have known and didn't know, is that all you have to do is add a flag --rerun tasks, and all the so-called up-to-date tasks will rerun again. And I mean, it's that simple. I had no idea about it. It's a perfect sweet spot for Mr. Hockey to add a very tiny but very, very useful blog post again.
Indeed.
Yeah. Now, moving on, SDK Manager, our beloved SDK man, with or without the exclamation point and the cartoony font, you know.
Yep.
They're doing a couple things, one of which I put in the show notes. It turned out that now they have a new command in sdkman 5.3.0 called outdated. And if you run the outdated command, or just O for short, it will offer to update all outdated candidates.
Yeah, I think it lists the outdated candidates, not actually trying to upgrade them. It just gives you the list of all of which are outdated.
No, I actually tried it. I was the only thing I had out of date at the time was I hadn't upgraded my Grails release to that 3.2.4. But I just said SDK you know, outdated, and not only did it detect that Grails was slightly out of date, it also proceeded to update it for me. It might have given me a prompt to hit yes or no, I think. I don't remember offhand.
Yeah, maybe it was a prompt, because I tried it as well, and I was under the impression that it's only lists the candidates. I think you're right. But whatever. I think that the biggest news, and I'm not sure we spoke about it, is the install of JDK.
Right. And I didn't put that in the show notes because it's not, I don't think it's official yet. I think that's still in beta. But if you go to their beta channel, if you can get on that beta program, they are making it possible to install the JDK through sdkman, which is an automated mechanism we have needed for years. I think I saw a screenshot that showed it prompt for you authorizing the license or something, that the box you always had to check on the website. And if you just said yes on that, then yes, you had a fully automated install of the JDK.
Yeah, so the prompt is Oracle requires that you agree to Oracle binary code license agreement, blah, blah, blah. And then do you agree to terms of the agreement? You go yes, and then it downloads. And it actually downloads the native package. So I'm on Mac, it downloaded the DMG, and then it knows how to mount it and find the package and install it, and do all the correct mounts and all the smart stuff inside. I have to say that the idea that you can install Java automatically after an approval of this agreement, it's not new. Debian or Debian based Linux distributions like Ubuntu did it for years. You could install Oracle JVM on Debian, and again, you have to approve the license. Jenkins does it when you want to automatically provision JDKs on agents. You approve it up front, and then it does it as well. But for the broader developer community that uses Macs, those are great. Those are great news.
Yeah. Okay. So other projects had created the groundwork. I wonder if he leveraged any of that to figure out how to do it himself. But one way or another, that's coming, and I hope that will be released relatively soon. The last thing I ever want to do is put any extra pressure on. Oh, geez, I just blanked on his name. How could I forget? Who does SDK man?
Marco Vermeulen.
Yeah, Marco Vermeulen, right? Because he does wonderful work. Not only that, he basically supports all of the servers that are serving up the clients, the candidates, and everything out of his own pocket. I think he's running on AWS or whatever, or some client in front of AWS. At any rate, I think he's doing that all himself, and we got to, as a community, somehow fix that.
So we spoke with Marco, I think, a year ago, and I proposed to think about how Bintray can help. Although I'm not sure that's the right fit, because Bintray serves binaries, and binaries for SDK come from different locations, whatever the vendor is using, right? So for example, when you install Java, it downloads from Oracle servers, not sdkman servers, and when you download Grails or Groovy, it does come from Bintray, but that's again not something that the SDK requires or designed around. And what Marco has, the sdkman, is mainly the backend logic that maintains the candidates and decides what should be served, etc. So but yeah, I believe we can somehow help.
Well, I mean, at minimum, I think he should do something like have a Patreon account. I'd support a handful of people using Patreon and kick in $5 a month just to defer some of the costs of what he's doing out there.
Yeah,
but
no, I agree.
Yeah, we'll talk to him at some point, see what the community can think of as a way to help that, because of course it's the tool of choice for pretty much everybody in the Groovy community on all of these different projects. And of course, it supports many projects that go well beyond Groovy, not limited to things like Scala and even Maven and the dreaded Kotlin as well.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay.
I don't know. Can it install Kotlin by now?
Yes, it can actually. I'm afraid so.
Oh, here you go. And that's interesting that you know about it.
I lobbed that softball over the plate. I was waiting for you to hit it. Yes. Another interesting development with the Grails people, I think we might have mentioned this at the G3 Summit, but we didn't document it anywhere. Grails now has these guides, the guides.grails.org, I believe. Let me just mouse over. Yeah, guides.grails.org. And I put in the names of the individual guides they have at the moment, but I didn't link to them because it's best, it looks like, just to go directly to that page and select one. They've got one on sending server events with Grails, and there's some RX Java under the hood. Building a REST app with either Gorman Hibernate 5 or MongoDB, and using the new React profile for Grails as well. I know, I was talking to Jeff Brown, I know they're going to be expanding those in the future, all trying to tackle this problem of how do you help people get up and running quickly and solve particular problems without having to just go to Stack Overflow or something like that.
Yeah, no, those mini guides are great, and what Trisha did is actually the same thing, right?
Yeah, exactly. A lot of companies are looking for this sort of, I don't know what you'd call it, community outreach, but developer support, something to make it easier to adopt the technology to solve a particular problem.
Absolutely, yes.
I know the Gradle people are working on things of that nature as well.
Yeah, that's a good thing to do. We have some around. Mentioning Scott Brown, by the way, I ran into him, I think, a couple of weeks ago here in Cupertino, and had the privilege to buy him an ice cream in a local Safeway. So, yep.
Very good. Well, he and I wound up on a flight together when leaving. I think it was when we were leaving the G3 Summit, because my flight got canceled or delayed or whatever. I wound up having to go on a different airline, and by just a sheer coincidence, I wound up on the same flight to, of all places, Charlotte, North Carolina, where we were both transferring to different planes. He was there with his wife as well, so we got a chance to go grab a bite to eat as well. So he's certainly making the rounds. He's being very active there.
Mm-hmm.
Now, there's been some tweets lately about new developments in Groovy that are at least scheduled. Daniel Sun, or Soon, I don't know how you pronounce it. Daniel Sun is, there was a tweet about him working on a parser called the Parrot parser.
Yes,
and one of the new proposed features is the good old Elvis assignment, right? Question mark equals. And we'll see how that goes. I'm waiting to see what happens with the new compiler. I know that's what they're working on partly for the Java 8 support as well. So when the new Java 8 syntax is available in Groovy, it will be using that Parrot parser, I believe.
Yep.
I don't know why they called it Parrot, though. Do you have any idea? It doesn't have any.
Well, no, I don't know, and that's an interesting question for Daniel. But I think those are this is the most exciting development with Groovy we had for years from technical perspective, because that's like kind of a rewrite of all the backend of the Groovy language, the meta object protocol, the parser, the lexer, everything is being rewrite because 10 years is more than 10 years. 15 years is a good aging for software, and we should get more robust version of Groovy, a faster, less puzzlers, right? Although that may be hard on me, but anyhow, and more features going on. So the Parrot is actually Groovy 3, and that's very exciting to see how it moves forward. And it looks like Daniel doing a great job there. What we can hear from the other committers like Paul King and Guillaume and Cedric, that they are very pleased with Daniel's progress. So this is great. I'm very excited about the Parrot.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that. I don't know any of that particular stuff. I mean, I don't know the underlying workings of the compiler, but I know they are working very hard. And as you say, there's been a lot of very positive, interesting developments that we can all look forward to for Grails Groovy 3 whenever that comes about.
Yep.
Now, I know I'm going to pronounce his name wrong again. He even came and told me, and I hope I get it. I think it's pronounced Skulk, actually. Skulk Kronya.
I have no idea, and
Yeah.
I agree with you that we need to learn.
Well, it's worse because he's told me. I mean, I know he's told me, and I still get it wrong. The name is South African, but I think he spends most of his time in I don't think he's in the UK now. I think he might be in the Netherlands or something. I know he's in Europe. At any rate, he released some information about the GradleTest plugin, which is now, of course, Skulk, you're no doubt aware, wrote a couple of the self-published books, the LeanPub books on best practices for Groovy or Gradle plugins, rather. At any rate, he wrote a GradleTest Gradle plugin, which allows you to test your plugin against multiple versions of Gradle. And he just released a new version of that, and that could be very useful. I don't know how many people take the time to test their plugin. Of course, it should be everybody, and this is definitely a good way to help automate that process.
Agreed.
So we have a link to that, and then that brings me to the good old Groovy Calamari. That's Sergio Delamore and the dreaded one-eyed pink squid nightmare.
Oh, you really got into this new logo.
I think that beast needs a name, don't you think? And the only name I could come up with was Nemo. Does that work for you at all?
I don't know. I think that's the Groovy Calamari.
Well, but the squid should have a name. I mean, I wasn't thinking Nemo as in Finding Nemo. I'm thinking Nemo as in 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, and some horrible beast from your nightmares that drags the ship down under it. No?
But nowadays everybody think Nemo, the Pixar animated movie Nemo.
Oh yeah,
when he was actually a tiny golden clownfish, very cute one, nothing to be afraid.
That's not the association I was looking for. And I know Nemo
I
is
know.
not the monster, but all right, well, we need a name, or I think that Sergio should have some kind of contest to name that beast Oscar.
That sounds a good.
Something.
Plan.
I assume it would have to start with a G, but maybe not. I mean, we're willing to be flexible on this, because if he doesn't come up with something, I'm going to have to. So we'll see how it goes. Any rate,
right.
He released a couple of Groovy Calamari issues. The latest one has some things about using enums with Grails domain classes. By the way, that's something I dealt with once years ago. I keep meaning to write a blog post about this, and then I realized how much work it would be to do the blog post, so I kind of get distracted to do other things. Years ago, I took a sample database from MySQL, the Sequila database that is a video store and everything, and I ported the entire domain model to Grails, including the functions, the stored procedures, and everything. And I've got it in my GitHub repo. It's just called Sequila in my GitHub repository, but I've never actually written a blog post to talk about all of that. And one of the things in there was an enum, for the movie ratings and everything.
Yes,
that was a fair amount of work. But at any rate, in the Calamari, this issue, that does have a discussion in there about Grails domain classes and enums. There's also a link to an article about using extension modules in Groovy, and then several talks about writing and working with AST transformations.
Yep.
as usual, we're always very grateful when the Groovy Calamari shows up, because then we can just piggyback right on top of that, flesh out.
Oh yes, good stuff.
Not to
Let's
mention
work for us.
Not to mention that that's good information, good stuff as well.
Yep.
I saw a tweet yesterday that said there are now 200 plugins available for Grails 3. I remember that there were many, many more in Grails 2, but that I saw Graham answer a question once, Graham Roche, commenting on the Grails plugins, saying that many of the Grails 2 plugins are no longer even needed in Grails 3 because you can leverage all the Gradle plugins now, as well as all the stuff from Spring Boot. So a lot of the things that we used to add through plugins have been submerged into the framework itself. But still, all the major plugins, if you are hesitating to transition to Grails 3 because you have particular plugins in mind, it's certainly worth a try by now.
Yep.
And of course, Spring Security was one of the first ones to get the full-scale treatment. I think that is still the #1 most used plugin in the Grails world.
Yeah, that makes sense, right? Every service you do with Grails requires security.
Now, Guillaume Laforge did a blog post and then gave a talk and then gave another talk at the G3 Summit, where he, of course, now a proud developer at Google, used Google's BigQuery to analyze, 500,000 Gradle build files hosted at GitHub. He was able to analyze those and determine some statistics, which are the most popular Gradle versions at the moment. Are there more Gradle projects or Maven projects? All this sort of stuff.
And of course, the thing that I liked a lot is the most popular Gradle plugin.
Yeah, and do you remember which one it was offhand?
JFrog.
Yeah, well, not a big shock, right? At any rate, there were a lot of interesting features there. There are a lot of Android plugins, but that was kind of inevitable because Android is every Android app in existence now uses Gradle as a build tool, and everything is done through a build script block to download the plugin. So not at all a surprise that plugin would show up a lot. Every Android project at GitHub would have that plugin in it. But there were
what? I'm looking now at the list of the. Sorry for getting back. Looking at the list of the plugins, I don't know where I got this idea, and I said JFrog, and it doesn't make any sense because, of course, the Java plugin, the Groovy plugin, the Android plugin should be way more popular, and of course they are.
Yeah. So I know it's in there.
So ours is it's of course there, and it's very high, and maybe it was the one that is not packed with Gradle, the first one which is external. But I just remember this tweet that it was somehow on top. Maybe that is the answer, because of course all the language plugins and the IDEA plugin and Eclipse plugin and Android plugin, all those are much higher as they should be. So maybe our was the first one, which is external one. That makes sense.
Well, I know the Build Init plugin puts in a repository for JCenter. It used to put in Maven Central. Now it's all JCenter. So at least that. I remember when looking at the version numbers as well, I think 2.4 was #1, but 2.14.1 was second, and then 3.1 was like in third or fourth. So it looks like people are upgrading. Not everybody has necessarily moved up to 3 yet.
It's also very interesting, the dependencies that people use, and that's interesting how the top three, all the top three are testing dependencies. The most popular, like 10 times more popular than the second one, is JUnit, and then we have Mockito, which I think is a transitive dependency of JUnit, if I'm not in error, and the third one is a Spock framework.
Have you used JUnit 5 yet? Have you done anything with that?
So I played with an early beta. It was like a little bit too complicated. I guess they simplified it since then. They have like 3 different dependencies, and it took me a while to understand what actually I need. I hope now it's better, but I think I'll stick with Spock for now.
Now this is I'm jumping on this early because it's not even formally released yet, JUnit 5. And of course, in the Groovy world, we have Spock, and most of the facilities that JUnit is adding in 5, we've already had for years. The parameterized feature tests and the,
Yes.
lots of other nice things are built right in. I wonder if the JUnit 5 people have any idea what kind of backlash they're going to get. They have changed just about everything. I mean, not to mention making it far more complicated just to choose what you want to add. But I mean, even the fact that before and after are gone, and now it's before each and after each. I mean, even stuff that's trivial has changed. And this is a testing framework that everybody knows, and nobody wants to have to relearn, So I'm waiting to see what the response is when this thing finally comes out and they're all excited and say, "Isn't this wonderful?" And have everybody go, "But you changed everything we liked," and we'll see how that goes.
Yeah, that will be interesting. I agree.
Yeah, I hope it'll go well, but I just don't know. We'll see. Any rate, back to the blog post by Guillaume Laforge. I put a link in there. He also does that presentation on a somewhat regular basis. If you get a chance to see Guillaume's discussion about running BigQuery on Gradle builds, I know he has plans to run BigQuery on many different projects, and of course he tries at Google to introduce Groovy wherever it is practical and possible to do so. So that's great.
Yeah, and I think that it's a great match, Guillaume and Groovy in Google, because they both give him the space and the time to keep being involved in Groovy, and he can introduce some great integrations between Google and Groovy in many ways. Both DSLs around existing Groovy APIs and using the Groovy power to somehow make those APIs even better, and the other way around, using tools that are only available from Google to promote Groovy, like this blog post.
Excellent. Just as an aside, I noticed there was actually a tweet by our good friend Peter Ledbrook, our friend.
Yes.
Yeah, who pointed out something that, again, I wish I'd known a while ago. It turns out in Grails, now I presume this is Grails 3, you can change the default package, or rather you can set the default package for all the artifacts when you create the app, just by, instead of saying create app, you say with a name, you give it the package name and everything, the fully qualified package name. Along, like his example was com.example.myapp, which will create a my app application with the default package being com.example. Now, fortunately, one of the nice features of Grails 3 is that you can go right into the application.yaml file, and there's a default package setting. So once you know about that, it's easy enough to change after the fact. I didn't know you could actually set that right on creation time.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting. By the way, I did exchange a brief email with Peter, just to let you know he is doing well. He's very happy right now. He's got a lot of things going on as usual, and hopefully I'll be able to grab him into at least being a guest on a podcast, even if he doesn't really necessarily want to come back on a regular basis. But we'd love to get him back on the podcast and say hi to everybody. But for those who are wondering, yes, he's around, he's active, and things are fine. Just wanted to mention.
Right. So what we know is that did he officially stand off, the podcast?
Say that again, please.
Did he officially stand off being one of the podcast hosts? I would say.
I don't know that Peter has ever officially done anything on that. I mean, I think he's kind of left the door open, and frankly, I'm perfectly happy to leave the door open for him whenever he would like to wander in.
Yeah, no, that what I really want him to be like,
Yeah, but I don't get the feeling. I actually, what I think is going to happen is I think he's planning to take a little bit of time off, actually, from pretty much everything. I think he needs to get away for a while. So we can put all kinds of pressure on him here just to show up and be a guest, but I don't know that we need to.
Yeah, no, that will work fine. That will work just fine.
But I did want to tell you, I did talk to him, and it was good seeing him.
Okay.
We'll try to
good.
Keep him involved. I think that's everything I had in my list. Right now, I'm in the gap between the end of one No Fluff Just Stuff season and the beginning of the next. The new No Fluff Just Stuff season begins at the beginning of March. I know I'll be attending well, first things first, I'm going to be attending GradleTest in India, in Delhi in January. So that's just a couple of weeks away. Looking forward to that. That should be a lot of fun. I have to update my talks though as well. And then after that, I'll be at DevNexus in February. Are you going to
DevNexus? That's where we will see each other.
Is that
and probably record another episode of the live podcast.
Will that be the debut of the new season of the Groovy Puzzlers?
Exactly. No, we don't do Groovy Puzzlers there just yet. I guess the new season will kick off at the GradleConf in Copenhagen. I think that's the plan.
I believe Venkat, Subramaniam will be at GradleConf in Copenhagen this year.
Oh, that will be awesome.
I think that's
a big attraction.
Very good. So we want to thank, of course, the No Fluff Just Stuff conference tour for giving us a homepage, a place where if you just go to nofluffjuststuff.com/Groovy Podcast, all the both YouTube videos and the audio files are available there, in addition to the normal RSS feed and everything through Podbean. Do you need to say anything nice about your company there or anything else?
I just want to mention the Alexa skill from Ryan again, that you can now listen to the Groovy podcast using your Echo devices, and I tried it at home, and I hate to hear myself speaking, so I had to stop very soon. But I can at least know that it works, and yeah, you all more than invited to use Alexa to listen to our podcast.
There was an interesting tweet that apparently the Wynn Hotel in Las Vegas, WYNN, is putting an Alexa Echo or the Amazon Echo in all 4,700 rooms of the hotel or something like that.
That makes a lot of sense, because there are a really good amount of self-service that they can offload to the machine and save themselves some money.
Well, I happen to think I like the Google Home that I have. I really think that's very nice. Although I have not yet been able to figure out how to get it to play the Groovy podcast. They did release their SDK for the Google Assistant, and I'm sure Ryan's hard at work trying to get all that to work as well.
Yeah, what I heard from Ryan is that he not a very big fan of the way they did it now, because from what I understood, all the APIs are outsourced to the API.ai service, which is it's a proprietary service that you need to pay in order to get access and this kind of stuff. So from what I understood, for a very brief conversation we had, he's still being pretty much Alexa guy at the moment, at least.
It's a very rich space. A lot of stuff's going to happen in that space, and we'll see how that plays out.
Absolutely, yes.
Over the next time. I do need to mention one minor thing that I've produced. I have a whole series of videos that are available on Safari, you're no doubt aware, some of which are on Groovy, some on Gradle, and some others. As part of another project I was working on, I got re-involved in Java 8 generics. I thought Java 8 generics was a solved problem, and it was, and I never really learned it. I learned the minimum I had to back when it came out in Java 1.5. But if you play with the Java 8 API at all, you see that they use generics in a huge way all through the API. So I decided it was time to really dig into that. And as a result of that effort, I produced a short video. I think on Safari, it's at most 2.5 hours, something like that, on understanding Java 8 generics. So if you go through shop.o'reilly.com, or if you're on Safari, you can feel free to listen to that and take advantage of it. There's a GitHub repository and everything. If that's something you're interested
in. No, that's important, and it's a good thing, because there are tons of people that still have hard time to get their head around generics. So that's a really good deed.
Yeah, it was a small thing, and it seemed useful. It certainly was helpful for me to get my thoughts straight on the One last thing, just to point out, this is the holiday season. This will be our last podcast of the year as well. We've done a bunch of them this year. That's really good. It's been a great pleasure working with you.
And with you.
And I know that some people, let's just say, are having a very difficult time this time of year. It may normally be a time of celebration and everything, but it's hard on some people, and I understand that. Let me just say, by way of any comfort that it might be, you're not alone. Okay, it feels difficult. It feels like we may be in for some difficult times in the future. It's been a very hard year for a lot of people. Just know that we're with you. We're listening. We obviously can't afford to lose any listeners, right?
Yeah.
But we're very happy to have you here, and we're all in this together. So please just hang in there. You have the best thing about the Groovy ecosystem is the community, and you're part of it if you want to be part of it. That's all it takes.
That's true.
So anything else, or are we all set?
Yeah, no, I think we should wish happy holidays to all our listeners, and Merry Christmas to whoever that's the big deal for them, and Happy Hanukkah for whoever celebrates Hanukkah. Happy New Year for everybody, I guess. And that's
or whatever.
This is it. Let's just try to to make those holidays as happy as we can. And I'm sure next year will be better than the previous one, just because that's what we have. That's what we hope every year.
And feel free to contact us at Groovy Podcast on Twitter. Of course, you could always contact us by email or any other way you like. And thank you very much, and we look forward to seeing everybody again in the new year.
Yeah, see you in 2017.
2017, yes. Okay, take care. Bye-bye.